Welcome to the Tuesday morning edition of Anglican Unscripted, episode 318. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm David Old on Tuesday evening in Maroochydore on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland in Australia.
Okay, I have our favorite Aussie on the line from Skype, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on this week in Australia, Sydney. And
Sydney today, Kevin. I am in Maroochydore, which is in Queensland on the coast. It's called the Sunshine Coast. They call it that for a reason. And I'm up here at the General Synod of the Anglican Church of Australia.
Okay, picture a mind of Australia in our heads. You have
Yes.
2 or 3 big coastal cities. Where are you within that?
Sure. So if you go about, I don't know, halfway up the right-hand side, which is east, for
Yep.
the technically minded people of Australia, there's a fairly big city called Brisbane, or some will call it Bris Vegas. And a little bit to the northeast there is Maroochydore
Okay.
and the whole Sunshine.
I'm going to put a little picture of that up on our screen so
You should
people can
do that.
see it, because
Yeah.
people obviously need to go there. Now you're there now. It's for General Synod. Also, we need to inform the audience that it's late there. It's very early here. You and I never see each other ever fully awake. You're either about to...
one or usually both
Yep.
are semi-comatose. It is, as I'm recording this, it's 20 past 11 at night on Tuesday. We're actually on the same day, which is pretty good for us.
That's not bad.
What time of morning is it for you, Kevin?
It is currently 9:19 a.m. East Coast Standard Time until the next hurricane comes and wipes out our time zone. Let's talk a little bit about Australia. George and I talked a little bit on Friday about Australia, and I got 3 or 4 emails going, well, how does it work down there? Is it one huge diocese or province? And I said, oh boy, I need to talk to David, because first of all, George and I probably didn't represent exactly how Australia really is in Anglicanism, and I got you on the line. Let's take care of it. How does it work?
Sure. So the Anglican Church of Australia is one of the provinces of the Anglican Communion, and we have, let me get this right, 23 dioceses, and we operate under what's pretty much a federal system.
Okay.
For the big legislation that the General Synod passes, it really needs to pass through each individual diocesan synod as well to actually have some force. So it's actually a product of our history, and it's a bit of a product of the way politics works in Australia anyway. We're sort of a federal system, and the places are pretty much spread out from each other. So we come and meet together every 3 or 4 years, but then the real hard work is taking the bills and the canons and things and actually trying to implement them in the individual diocese as well.
Okay. Last year we had the Royal Commission looking into the horrible allegations and proven conduct within the church dealing with pedophiles, sexual problems, and just a devastating report from the Royal Commission. You guys are addressing that this time at General Synod.
Yeah, so the main business that we've got to, and we've pretty much accomplished now in 2 days, is a number of bills dealing with strengthening up some at times already robust measures about child abuse and safe ministry and things like that. Today we looked at Episcopal standards and how they refer to how our bishops have dealt with this matter. Learning from the past so that we can do better in the future. Yesterday we had one of the commissioners from the Royal Commission, Commissioner Fitzgerald, actually had come in to address the General Synod, and today by video we had one of the ministers in the government, in the federal government, speak to us because they want to set up a national redress scheme for victims, survivors we call them, of abuse when they were children, and asking us to be part of that, which is not as easy as it might seem, because the government from the outside kind of views us, and the population in general views us like you might view, say, the Roman Catholic Church as one single entity. But as I've explained to you before, we're not. We're actually 23 bodies that have come together. And so there is no actual Anglican Church of Australia to join the redress scheme. There will probably ultimately be 23 dioceses individually joining the redress scheme. What's really interesting about that is that we don't actually have the legislation from the government in front of us. We actually don't know what we're talking about. And there are some questions around insurance coverage and whether the standard of proof, the burden of proof that the redress scheme will require is different to the burden of proof that the insurance companies will require, and all that kind of stuff. So there's what's really clear around the room is a real desire to do something solid, and we've passed a number of canons and bills already that do something solid, and you can read a little bit about them on my website. But there's still some work to be done on quite what it will look like. But we've kind of got that bit of the business pretty much dealt with in the first 2 days. And there was a bit of hesitation about whether we could do, but we've done it.
Our secret embedded sources fed us some news right before Synod started that there's going to be a complaint filed against 3 bishops who flew to Wheaton and helped perform the consecration of Andy Lyons.
Yes.
Is that progressing through the Synod as well?
Yeah, well, it's nothing to do with the Synod in one sense. It was a referral made by let me get this right. Bishop Andrew Curnow of Bendigo sent the referral to he sent it to the primate, and a number of other people signed on to it. So Bishop John Stead of Willocker is one, and Bishop Kay Goldsworthy of Gippsland, soon to be Archbishop in Perth, when she's translated next year.
A little chest pain there, sorry.
Okay. And a couple of others signed this letter and sent it to the primate and said, look, we're a bit concerned about, they only named 2 of the bishops, Glenn Davies of Sydney and Richard Condy of Tasmania, and said, we're concerned about this. What have they done? Do they have the power to declare in or out of communion, and can they consecrate bishops and all that kind of stuff? And look, it was a bit of they're having a go. Let's face it. And they sent this letter to the primate and asked them to refer the matters to the appellate tribunal. The appellate tribunal you could call it like the Supreme Court or an appeals court in the Anglican Church, but what it really is just a body that issues an opinion. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say that some of its opinions in the past have been considered to be politicized, which you Americans would know nothing about.
What are you talking about?
Anyway. And so they'd been referred, and the primate chose to pass it on and passed it on. The first action of the secretary, I think it was, or the lead counsel in the appellate tribunal, was to say, well, could you actually define what the question is here? Anyway, all the text of that is on, I think, the Anglican Inc. Website, and I've got it up now on my website as well, so you can read those referral charges of those 2. And then there's also another referral to the appellate tribunal where the Diocese of Newcastle has been particularly upset, at least their current assistant bishop, who's the administrator there, upset at the Diocese of Sydney's support for some independent church planters that are going on there and elsewhere. So there's a number of matters which have kind of been the background to General Synod, and I think the way that they were done by particularly the referral of Condy and Davies. I think the way that was done has upset some people in that Davies and Condy weren't contacted in advance by the writers of the letter. The first they heard was when when the primate wrote to all the bishops to say, I've referred these matters on to the appellate tribunal. So that wasn't handled too well, but it will be heard after General Synod.
Well, right now, a lot of people in our audience are absolutely, relieved, because we've been talking now about the Australian Church for about 10 minutes, and we've not talked about same-sex marriage. Clearly, your diocese and your synod is able to overcome these issues within the church, and probably never even came up. Right?
No, we'll soon sort that out. So the background, of course, here is that politically the Australian government has been, let's face it, avoiding this the matter of marriage redefinition being dealt with in the Australian Parliament, and they promised a plebiscite in their election manifesto, but they couldn't really get that through their party room, and they couldn't get it through the Senate here, which they don't control, and so they've gone for a postal survey. So every elector, every person on the electoral roll in Australia has been given a going to be mailed out a postcard, basically, where they can say yes or no to changing marriage. And it's a bit of a
boy, that's 1850 technology right there.
It is just well, look, it's a bit of a disaster. Anyway, that's the background, and so kind of the whole same-sex marriage debate is we're going right through now what you guys went through last year in the run-up to Obergefell,
sure,
and all that stuff. So that's the background, and so we're dealing with it. And the Diocese of Sydney, in particular, has been one of the main engagers in the no vote. There and supporting the organisation there. So there are a number of matters before General Synod in the form of motions. The first is one that's been put forward through Bishop Michael Stead, who's the Assistant Bishop in Sydney, and it's basically an affirmation of the doctrine of marriage, and noting the General Synod has talked about this many times in the past, and we've always said the same thing, and can the Doctrine Commission maybe help us have a good conversation through some essays and things, and how do we deal with it well? And so that's a pretty vanilla motion on marriage that should pass, but then also the Dean of the Cathedral in Sydney, Kanishka Rafal, has put up a cracker of a motion declaring the Anglican Church of Australia to be out of communion with the Scottish Episcopal Church because of their action.
No, you can't do. Only the Archbishop of Canterbury can do that. I've been assured of this by himself.
Well, it is a there are some. Well, there may be some in General Synod tomorrow or the next day who disagree with Canterbury, and the premise. Having read the motion now, the premise of the motion is that the fundamental declarations of the Anglican Church of Australia say that we're in communion with those who all the stuff about Canterbury and England and stuff, but then who teach the doctrine of Christ. So the argument, I think, is going to be that because this is a rejection of the doctrine of Christ, we're therefore now out of communion with them. It's a bit of a test motion. I'm not sure if the movers really think they can win, but it's one of those motions, I suspect, where whether you win or you lose, you've still got a result, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Well, people want to, we always get mixed signals because the loudest voice out of Australia is the conservative voice. As far as social media and stuff like that, and people go, well, is Australia, are they conservative, are they liberal, what kind of province are they? Well, I always say, well, they're not tech liberal yet, and they're not Nigeria conservative yet. Where do you fall there within that as a province?
We're a mixed economy. So some dioceses are particularly conservative, and some are particularly liberal, and probably the extremes are on either coast. So the Diocese of Sydney, which is by far and away the largest representation here. Almost a third of all the delegates here are from Sydney.
Oh, that's wow! Good job.
Well, it's interesting. Well, because when the Constitution was formed in the early '60s, we decided to do representation proportional to the number of ordained clergy in each diocese. And Sydney just keeps growing, and we crank them out, and so we got a really good representation there. The second biggest would be Melbourne, but they're still some way behind. The most liberal diocese is going to be the Archdiocese of Perth, where, of course, Kay Goldsworthy has just been elected as Archbishop, and where their synod has already passed previously a motion affirming same-sex relationships and looking for some form of blessing. And so that's coming, Kevin. It would be naive not to expect that sort of motion to be passed again once Kay Goldsworthy has been made Archbishop, and unlike her predecessor, Roger Hurft, she is unlikely to say no to it, and already in media interviews that she's given since her election has pointed that way. So we're really quite a mixed bag. We've got one classically Anglo-Catholic diocese in the Murray, and we've got some mixed economy dioceses, the most clear one of which is Melbourne, some other conservative dioceses, some other sort of soft and not so soft liberal dioceses. It's a real mixed bag. It's the constitution of the church that's actually holding us together right now, and in one sense holding back the tide. But I suspect, and I'm not the only one, that if we get legislation for a change in marriage definition in the whole country over the next year, that may precipitate some pastoral responses from some dioceses, and we'll be away.
Well, from news reports, the Liberals are doing their, modus operandi. Any opposition to anything that looks weird is hate. And I saw a couple interviews with you and some other people, Anglicans, who actually are good defenders of classical marriage. And but how do you think this is going to play in the national country of Australia? Are you going to eventually have same-sex marriage?
Look, you know what? It was really interesting. I would have said, you asked me this question 6 months ago. I would have said, yeah, it's coming. And then the Labour Party, who are in the opposition here, but are firmly in favour of redefinition of marriage, really opposed the plebiscite. And one suspects it's because, well, one of the rumours was because their internal polling suggested that they might actually not win the plebiscite. And you've got the usual thing happening here, which you had in America and Ireland and other places, where you got the whole, well, it's a done deal, isn't it? So let's just get on and do it. And that kind of just moral pressure on people. I suspect that the postal survey may be surprising. It may get a no vote. But more than likely, you'd probably get a yes vote. The activists come out. It's non-compulsory. Voting in Australia is normally compulsory, but because this is not a plebiscite now, it's just a survey. It's not compulsory. So the real big thing is getting people out, getting the vote out. I suspect we're going to see legislation in Parliament for same-sex marriage within 6 months. Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I do. Is there anything else we need to talk about before you go to sleep? And no. What do you got?
We need to talk about hymns. We
Yes.
need to talk about the closing. Look, Kevin, there are moments, aren't there, where you just go, "Really? Did that just happen?" And we had one of those right at the end of day 2. We closed with
It was John Lennon, "Imagine," right?
No, it was more subtle than that, although actually about as subtle as a brickbat to the face. So we had evening prayer from the APBA, which is a standard prayer book many people are using, and it all went through swimmingly. We did our readings and our prayers and our collects, and then at the end we sang a hymn, and it was a hauntingly eerie melody, and the lyrics went like this. She sits like a bird brooding on the waters, hovering on the chaos of the world's first day. If your antenna just pricked up there, then you've picked up what's going on here. She sighs and she sings, mother in creation, waiting to give birth to all the world. The word will say. 2 more verses in the middle, and then at the end, for she is the Spirit, one with God in essence, gifted by the Saviour in eternal love. She is the key, opening the scriptures, enemy of apathy, and heavenly dove. And can I say, it was, well, a lot of people stopped singing.
Yeah.
Some of them sat down, and some of them walked out. And I have been chatting to conservatives tonight, not just evangelicals, but softer evangelicals and Anglo-Catholics, and some of them are pretty outraged. I have seen some senior leaders in the church who are pretty steamed up about this one. And they're feeling offended, not just because it's just outright heresy, but also because the way that it was done, sneaked in right at the end. The people who put it in would have known that it would be offensive.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
in a way, you just entered the 4th stream of Anglicanism, the Anglican Gnostic Church. Congratulations, guys! Thank you. Leaders in reform in our church. Wow. That's amazing.
Well, we're always a bit behind here. I think we just got out of fluoro recently, but we're trying to catch up with tech. No, it was a real surprise to see it. Quite frankly, the Australians can often be a little bit like the British, polite and not wanting to provoke things when they don't have to. But this is being seen as a deliberate provocation, and quite how they slipped it in, and quite how the people in charge of liturgy, General Synod, allowed this one to go through. Well, those conversations, I'm sure, are being had. Well, it's 11:30 now. Maybe they're still being had, and they certainly will be had tomorrow. And some answers will be requested.
David, I want to thank you for staying up so late and telling us the chaos.
You and your viewers, anything. And I suspect after what we've talked about today, we may have to be back on in a couple of days' time to report further.
I look forward to it. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm David Old.
And you've been watching episode 318 of Anglican Unscripted.